Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us at this Mozilla Festival panel on innovating in India for the next billion users. We're really excited today to bring you some of India's leading media and technology entrepreneurs for this discussion, really trying to dig into what's going on in India. It's such an important market. There's, so many people and so many people who need access to information and coming online day by day. So we're going to have a really rich discussion, digging into all the issues that come about with building products and getting people online. I'll start by introducing our panel, starting with Sairi Chahal. She's the founder and CEO of Shiros. Shiros is a women-only social platform. It's the world's largest online ecosystem for women and has a national and global footprint of 21 million women. Sairi is also on the board of directors of Paytm Payments Bank and the Milan Foundation, and the advisory board of the US-based initiative Women in the Cloud. She has an MPhil from JNU and a PG from IMT Ghaziabad. She's also an Aspen Fellow and Katia Award alumni. In a personal capacity, Sairi has mentored hundreds of women entrepreneurs and continues to do so to strengthen the women-led entrepreneurship ecosystem. Next up, we have Samir Patel. Samir is driving Scrollstack's product teams to build a mobile-first, multilingual global payment system. Earlier, he grew Scroll.in into India's largest destination for news, culture, and sports. Before Scroll, Samir founded ACK Media, which was acquired by Future Group, and he was an associate partner at McKinsey & Company in New York. He has the master's degree in business and engineering from MIT. Also with us is Supriya Paul, who's the co-founder and CEO of Josh Talks, a social startup headquartered in Gurgaon. In 2020, she was listed as one of the 20 self-made women by Forbes India. At the young age of 20, Supriya co-founded Josh Talks with Shobit Banga. Owing to the success of her startup, she has been recognized as one of the top entrepreneurs in India. In 2018, she was featured in Forbes 30 Under 30 Asia list for bringing about a positive change within the youth community and impacting the lives of millions. Driven by this goal, Supriya has recently edited a collection of 30 stories to inspire young India to do more in their life. The book titled All You Need Is Josh is Supriya's debut book, and it will be released next month. In addition, she serves as an advisor and mentor for the Women Economic Forum, Atal Innovation Mission, and the Founder Institute. And last but not least, Vijay Sai Pratap, who's the CEO of Grambani. Vijay is the CEO and otherwise known as Onion Dev Technologies. They're a social enterprise that builds innovative voice-based community media technologies for the underserved with a mission to reverse the flow of information. Working closely with communities and partners across sectors, Grambani has touched over 2.5 million individuals, enabling them not just to access and share life-impacting information, but also voice their opinions or ask questions. A telecom and technology for development professional with over 17 years of experience. Vijay is an engineering graduate from the University of Madras, holds a master's in business administration and a business law degree as well. He's also an Acumen India Fellow. So, very illustrious panel. And, I'm also proud to say that MGIF, we're a proud investor and supporter of each one of these companies. So, these are entrepreneurs we work with who are really mission first and really trying to have an impact, not just in India, but and beyond. So to kick off this discussion, Vijay, we're talking about bringing, how do we serve the next billion users? And I think one of the things that's really interesting about what you've been doing is you've been taking up a bottom-up approach to this. And you've built what some people describe as a Twitter network for rural India. And you're really focusing on a illiterate and semi-literate population who have important information needs, but literacy and access has always stood in the way for them. Could you perhaps tell us about how this idea came about and what you were trying to solve?
Thank you so much, Mohammed, and wonderful to be on this panel. Truly proud to be on this panel, very glad. So yeah, I think Grambani's focus, as you rightly said, is to reverse the flow of information. And this is primarily to address the information asymmetry largely, right? So if we indeed call information as power, then more than half the population of the country is deprived of access to credible, contextual, and timely information, right? So this all the more becomes pertinent in the case of the most marginalized and underserved communities, when most conventional media platforms would largely focus on a top-down approach and be focused on information that is more of a broadcast information, and also an opportunity to participate in the dialogue, in the conversations on topics that impact their lives. There are very limited, or rather no channels that are available that really empower these communities, right? So our primary focus, our main objective was that, our belief was that a lot of these gaps or issues are because of conventional ideologies or conventional systems or situations where people have not got an opportunity to, either through literacy issues or access to information or technology related issues or access to media related issues. Now, what we are trying to do is that we believe that, a lot of these issues can be solved through good policies, but these good policies in a democratic setup have to be demanded by people. And if people have to demand for these services or better access to services, then they have to be better informed, right? So if they have to be better informed, then we need participative media platforms that can enable people not just to understand why these gaps arise, but also be able to debate, ask, and demand for many of these services. The very objective of Gramvani was to reverse this whole process, right? So the whole conventional top-down approach to reversing that whole process and be able to hear these voices, listen to them, to what they want to say, and to be able to contribute these learnings and insights back to the ecosystem in terms of policy level interventions, and also be able to impact people both at an individual level, community level, and at an institutional level. And voice being the lowest common denominator, for the mobile penetration growing amongst this target population very widely, we believe that voice was the very logical and the lowest common denominator to start off with. And people with a simple feature phone, they could just give a missed call, they get a call back from the platform, and it is almost created in the form of an interactive radio where people access information, and they are also able to engage with the platform in terms of not just listening to information, but also be able to ask questions, share their opinions. And that's exactly why you rightly said, it's almost like the Twitter of the hinterland, right? So, and that's how Gramvani's whole mission has been driven. So what we're working right now is not just to empower people with access to information and an opportunity to participate, but also be able to take it further to a logical destination in terms of impact or change by collaborating with concerned stakeholders on the ground. So that's where Gramvani's whole mission has begun and continues to work towards.
That's fascinating. So when you're describing this voice system where somebody gets a call back from your system and can just talk to the platform, what does that mean? So somebody calls and they ask a question or they want some information. What happens then?
Think of it almost like a social media platform, right? So, but it's all on voice, where people give a missed call to the Mobile Vani number. We call it Mobile Vani, the federated network of community media platforms. So each community or each district, both geography or theme-based, have a dedicated instance and a mobile number that is mapped to that instance. So people in that community give a missed call to that number. They get a call back from our platform, and they pick up the call and they listen to it like a radio. They navigate through content that is packaged in the form of channels. For example, one of the district channels, which is called Jamui Mobile Vani. Jamui is a district in Bihar, province in Bihar. So people will call that number. They are welcomed by saying that Jamui Mobile Vani mein aapka swagat hai, or welcome to Jamui Mobile Vani. And they are able to interact with or engage with the system by listening to information, pressing 1 to shift channels, by pressing 2 to record their question or record their opinion. If people record their question or opinion, on the back end, we have a moderation team, the responses that we collate with the help of our expert teams or with our partner network as well. And when it is posted back on the platform, just like on social media, people are not just able to see the information, but they are also able to see the questions and the responses that are provided along with those comments or those pieces of information. That allows for community sharing of knowledge as well, right? And that's why it is almost like a social media, but on voice. And people listening to their own voices is truly empowering, right? So people in the community, when they listen to their voices, they're able to record grievances. These grievances are shared. So we actually work with a very strong network of community volunteers who actually are our eyes and feet and ears on the ground. And they help us create the trust, and the connect with the concerned communities we work with. We believe that the communities have to own these platforms. Only then will there be sustainable and long-term change, right? So we cannot come from outside and understand the context of their issues or their problems. It is only when the communities take ownership of these technologies or these platforms will there be sustainable and long-term change. So these volunteers play that critical role of connecting us to these communities and contributing hyperlocal news by sharing these grievances with local authorities, coordinating with them, ensuring these grievances are addressed. So those stories are recorded back on the platform, inspiring other people, right? And that is how the collective action is created through these community media platforms, which are participatory media platforms, helping the community to not just become informed, take informed decisions, but also be able to drive collective action across the community as well.
That's fascinating. And as we think more about local community and what that means and how we build information ecosystems for them, I think what you're building plays such an important component of that. But talking of community, I guess, Supriya, what you're building with Josh is building community as well, but focused on a different segment and with somewhat different approach. I know you've just crossed 1 billion views on your platform for your talks in about 10 different languages, and your focus has very much been on the youth of India. So tell us a bit about how did you start this? Because it's grown tremendously. You're obviously touching a lot of people.
Sure. So, we sort of started Josh Talk stemming from our own frustration. Shobit and I, we were in our final year of college and we were super confused about what to do in life, what stream to choose, what subjects to take up, what career profession to actually go into. And one of the things that we found at that time was that we always had to seek to the West for inspiration. We always had to look at Steve Jobs' commencement speech to motivate us to actually get up and, take the entrepreneurial path. But for people who were studying with us in college, and I studied in Delhi University, who were coming from all parts of the country, from all types of economic backgrounds, there was no way for them to get access to role models. So that's what we started Josh with. The idea was super simple, that how can we basically create a platform that gives rural youth access to role models. So people who look like them, talk like them in their own language, and people whose impact is relative to what they want to do in their life. For example, for somebody who's sitting in a small town in, say, Jharkhand, he doesn't aspire to be, Ritesh Agarwal or the CEO of Oyo Rooms, which is a big startup in India. He aspires to be a local shopkeeper and earn 50,000 rupees so that he can provide for his family. But that's not the story that he hears on a regular basis. The stories he hears are of, local goons, etc. in that particular village. And those are his role models. So that's what we try to do, bring out positive stories from the grassroots of India across multiple vernacular languages. And we started off with events, and now it's a completely online-based community. We put out close to, I think, 180 talks every month, and the viewership is growing. And now what we're also working on is that this community that we've built, who's super inspired and aspires to be someone, how can we connect them, or how can we connect them with opportunities, and how can we also equip them with the right skill sets to be able to do well in life? So the next phase of actually becoming employable or becoming the career path that they chose for themselves. So that's what we're working on currently.
And it seems that, as you've been thinking about this and building this, what struck me was, you were really looking at two things that people needed. One was, sort of the confidence to think they could do something which perhaps wasn't something they were expected to do or their families expected them to do, because of, the way things are passed down by generation. And also to give them the information to sort of break out of the cycle of, just what's that next bit of information that could perhaps change their lives and change the trajectory of their family, which wasn't, go and become the CEO somewhere, but rather, do something, join the army or join the police force or become you connected them with something that was quite achievable as a next step.
Absolutely. So, the entire approach that we follow till now is that how can we play the role of an elder brother, or Bade Bhaiya as we call it, in this entire journey for this person who has probably not had that person guide them. Even in terms of, for example, if you look at the demographic that we cater to, English isn't a language for them. English is a skill. and they don't know that they need English for jobs eventually. So by the time that they realize it, they're already 23, 24 years old, and they're not able to move ahead in life because of this barrier. So the next product that we're actually working on is a product that teaches people how to speak in English fluently. So the idea is to, sort of occupy this journey of a young person right from the time that they turn 13 and start thinking about what to do in life till the time that they're 25, which is like the time that people think we are settled in India, or so-called settled, and just help them with tools and products along the way that a father would do for us, say.
Well, and clearly it's been received quite well by the youth. Are there any success stories that you've come across that you think really exemplifies what Josh Talks is doing?
Absolutely. So, from the impact of the talk. So, for example, somebody in Madhya Pradesh watched a story of a local sarpanch, or a person who holds a village level post, and he decided to contest the election in his village that year because he was super inspired about how politics could bring about change. There have been stories of people, who switched career streams completely because they realized that what they were doing and what they wanted to do was two different things. There is a TB survivor who got motivated by one of the stories, and now he has a support group for tuberculosis survivors, and he's helping them get by in life. And then more tangible is on the skills level, where people have been able to learn English, and because of that, either they've got employed for the very first time, or people who were earning say 15,000 to 20,000 rupees now, after being able to communicate effectively, are now earning between 25 to 30,000. So that has changed their household income drastically.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. Perhaps let's shift gears and go to Sairi. When I first started looking at what Sairi was building, I couldn't access it because it was catering for a very specific community and audience. And Sairi, now you're sitting with over 21 million women in your network. And it really, provides a safe space for women to learn, share, but also earn an income. How did you get here? What led you to start this?
Well, I think, so India's gender gap is known to all. That's not new at all. Every year when Davos happens, I think one of the things that glaringly stands out is how this aspirational economy that wants to be $1 trillion economy has the largest gender gap in the world. So it's damn glaring, but to me, the big thesis is, as it comes more into our lives, and as more and more women get onto the smartphone, they get onto data packs. This is the biggest tool for social and financial mobility that they have access to. I think for women, the biggest challenge is not just patriarchy, but also social structures, social mobility, both physical mobility and moving up the value chain in your life is a very, very hard ask. So what are we doing here? We created a women-only space, because culturally, women-only space is a thing. Women-only communities have done extremely well in India, whether it was microfinance or whether it was companies like Amul or Fab India, or women-only networks like Anganwadi workers or Asha workers. So we have a tradition of women-only. And here now, these are women who are coming online. When I started Sheroes, I think the number of women online was 10, 11, 12 million, something that was minuscule. And our first business plan said we'll get to 1 million women and then everybody can IPO. But here we are at almost touching 25 million, in this quarter. And we hope to get to like 100. But the big tailwind that we're riding is that India latched on to the data revolution, the WhatsApp revolution, and digital payments revolution. And there's no stopping anybody who's tasted the internet. It's a personal device. It's your own name out there. So what are we building? When a woman comes to Sheroes, she finds her own identity. Sheroes is her space. It's her version of LinkedIn. It's her version of Gmail. It's her version of Clubhouse. Second is she finds this big network of other women, of champions, of organizations, and a lot of people who are supporting them. And of course, that's the job that Sheroes does as curator. Third is access to well-being. We run a helpline, which is our biggest, you can call it a growth hack, but it's also our attention tool and acquisition tool and all of everything. Over 2 million women have availed of free counseling via that. And when I say counseling, it is ask us anything. Ask us about careers or relationship or whatever you need to talk about. And fourth is access to income via employment and entrepreneurship, which is a big gap. I mean, we all know India has 7% women in workforce numbers, and given the state of the economy, job growth hasn't happened in a while, so we are relying more on entrepreneurial opportunities. So to a woman, this is her internet calling card. This is her club membership that she's not going to sort of give up. And once she's within the Sheroes ecosystem, she will only benefit from it. The system's designed to work in her favor. And of course, it's built on a lot of tech. It's built on platforms. It's built for scale. And everybody is welcome. And I think the most interesting part about Sheroes is that it may sound like that we're talking a lot of serious stuff here, but to a user, she's just walking into an app.
I think Sari's internet connection, she's currently in a village in India where the connection isn't great. So she'll dial in a moment. Perhaps while she's reconnecting, we had a question from Philip Conrad, who had a question for you, Supriya.
Yeah.
And do you connect people locally on a personal level or digitally?
So it's digitally. So our primary tool of distribution for the talks is YouTube, which is where, like Mohammed said earlier, we've done about 1 billion views cumulatively. And the same viewer who's watching us on YouTube is now funneled down to our own Android application, which is called Joe Skills, where they're learning skills that can help them get jobs. So the Skills app is a more personalized experience. Like we use a WhatsApp style chat-based interface to teach, and that's where they can connect with each other. There's also a calling feature where you can speak to anybody else who's also learning English just to help you improve. So that's where more of the community building and the connection actually happens.
Great. Sari, it looks like you may be back.
Yes, I'm back.
Sorry, do you want to go ahead and finish that thought?
Yes. So basically, I was saying that she was just a safe space for women to nurture and grow and hang out. I think we all do well when we are not judged. And I think people are smart enough to figure out their options. So on one hand, we're just creating a safe space and learning from peers. And on the other hand, we are obviously lining up resources. So we run a remote work business where women work from home. They work for large companies, and the whole transaction stack is Sheroes. Similarly, called SheCommerce, where women are micro entrepreneurs, and they kind of own shops on Sheroes and distribute a lot of D2C brands. So we at heart, we're a community. Now we're leveraging all these levers that plow it back into the community, and that's why there is a very strong network effect. Women go and tell other women, they tell their friends, and it's almost like a super app. It's a term I don't like, but they get to do a lot of things with the same login.
One of the, I want to come back on the business side and, some of the commerce you're enabling a bit later in our conversation. But, one of the things that struck me, I heard you on a talk just before this one. I know you're going from back to back public talks. But one of the things that really struck me is you told a story about when you were leaving school and about how empathy was so important and was some feedback you had gotten from a teacher. And how you're using that when when you were building this platform, it was, you were really thinking about empathy to be built into it. And I thought that was quite fascinating, especially in this day and age when we're seeing so much, all the things that we see with our social media and how it's causing divisiveness.
Absolutely. I think empathy is at the core of building, I think building for the next billion needs a lot of empathy, otherwise, we're not going to get there. Also, look, I think we are a country that has a huge population and very little resources. So if we do not practice kindness overall, I think we're setting ourselves up for failure.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's some of those lessons which we're learning, in India, as we build in this market that, need to be taken back. Supriya spoke about how, we'd look to the US for inspiration for lots of the products we are building, and we were trying to find local locally made role models and ideas. And I think it's time to export some of these. Speaking of which, Samir, you've built Scroll.in, one of the most important news and information players in the Indian market. So, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about that, but then to really tell us about what you're building with ScrollStack. Because it seems like, you've been working on news and now you're really looking at how to empower makers and creators, and give them the tools to thrive, which I think, approaches this topic somewhat differently from, thinking about a traditional news operation.
Yeah, no, so the scroll stack in a way flows, directly out, out of the experience I had in trying to get Scroll to scale, which, some of is 10, 12 million unique visitors a month, fairly large and slowly built out organization and audience, which is very, what would I say, loyal. And in building that, the paradox that is at the heart of the internet right now is very clear to anybody who tries to build a media company, which is the paradox being there are very large audiences on the one hand for many individuals or publications or what have you, but it is really hard to monetize it, right? So on the one hand, leave alone just Scroll, but even there are creators who may have audiences on Instagram that are bigger than fashion magazines. There are creators who have podcast reach bigger than radio stations, and it is really difficult because the entire model has been ad supported. So that was the idea behind Scroll Stack, and in that way is a direct link to my experience with Scroll. And then the second paradox is what Sairi and others have been pointing out, that India has its own creator economy, its own issues with languages, and there's almost like the fact that 60% of the world's internet content is in English. You take a language like Hindi with 500 million speakers, it has less than, it's not even in the top 20 by content languages on the internet. And some of it is because of video, and video has taken over the net, but a lot of useful information, a lot of things that are text or images or explanatory video plus text is just simply not there because it's very hard to sustain that activity. So those are the two things. Again, they come directly from my experience with Scroll, which Scroll Stack is trying to solve, which is to actually make it very, very simple for anybody to create on the internet, decide how much it will be for, and then charge anybody in the world, right? Which is the third part of what I would say, since we're talking about India. I think famously India's GDP in India is almost the same as India's GDP outside India from all the expats. So I think a lot of Indian creators would be very well served by being able to offer their creativity to the world. So in fact, we think those are going to be some of the early adopters of Scroll Stack as a platform. So with that, I'll stop if you have questions, but that's roughly the idea of Scroll Stack. And the idea is that, again, coming from India, it's mobile first, it's multilingual, and it allows any creator to charge anywhere in the world. Did we lose?
And you think I'd know how to unmute myself by now, after spending a year on Zoom. So, Samir, when somebody signs up or comes and joins ScrollStack, what are they really doing? What's the reason that they're coming there? So you're saying it's multilingual. You're saying they can make payments. What are they actually going to see and do?
Yeah, so what we find now, we have been up in open beta for a while, and we have almost 2,000 creators. So I can actually answer that question empirically, and as well as what we think we want them to do. So the first thing is that if today you want to actually create something online and be your own brand, kind of graduate from social media, there are a lot of people. There are, like, again, famously, India has more people on social media than any other country. We see this as a graduation from social media to create your own identity online. The counterfactual for them is to create either a website or and especially an e-commerce enabled website would cost you a few lakh rupees. We are bringing that cost down to zero, right? So if you wanted to make a Wix or a Squarespace or any of that, you don't have to do any of that. The integration with payments is already there. You can get global payments anytime, right? So that's like foundationally the thing. It's creating your own voice, creating your own brand on the net, where you are in control of everything. You're in control of your IP. You're in control of who sees your content, whoever you distribute it to. You're in control of the email lists and phone numbers that you gather on your site, right? So that's the foundational element. The second is that we are seeing that our idea is that anybody who has more than 1,000 followers on social media, that's a group of almost 100 million people globally, right? And that is actually an undercounting, because it is 1,000 maybe a random cutoff, because there are a lot of people who may have very large followership on WhatsApp, which we don't see. So our target audience is that, right? People who want to graduate from social media for their own reasons, for being able to control their content, their brand, their ability to gather their followers into supporters, and then maybe charge for it. And then the second is that there are hundreds of millions of them, and that group is just growing. So that's what we expect to happen. And what we are seeing is some of that pattern already. Many of the people, the earliest people to make money on Scrollstack are people who are selling a fictional story, writing fashion tips, or skincare tips, writing the more traditional economics blogs. So what we see will happen are these people could not have made money on any other platform, right? So the way we see it, I said there are 100 million creators right now, and all the creator platforms are targeted at trying to solve the problem of the top 1 or 2% with their newsletter solutions or Patreon, with like very high barriers to being able to do something. Our idea is to solve the problem for the rest of the 98%, and we are seeing some of that already on the platform, right? Again, no friction to starting up, no limitation. If you know social media, you know how to use Scrollstack, and you can be anywhere in the world. So that's really our sort of what we are building this for the 98% of the creator economy.
That's fascinating. So just before we move forward, we've got a question in the chat, and just to remind everybody in the Zoom room with us, if you've got any questions to our panelists, you can pop it into the comment box, which is where we'll pick it up. Hanan asks, Sairi, do you have any examples of how Sheroes connects women entrepreneurs to the broader market?
Oh, absolutely. So actually, we work with entrepreneurs in different cohorts. So the first cohort is women who do not have any products of their own, but they're very enterprising. They do not have capital to invest in a business. So that's where what we do is we bring the entry of B2B brands into our ecosystem at very, very negotiated preferred rates. So there is an upside for the entrepreneur. And what she really ends up getting is a platform on Sheroes, which is a social platform. So we all know that commerce is going social. The future of commerce is social. Transactional commerce is on its way out. And what's really happening here is not only women are able to access their peers as potential customers, they also access the extended network. And what they end up doing is also building like a internet presence for themselves. So these are women who are possibly only use WhatsApp. They are women who have never before either ventured out, or they don't own any property or capital, and this way they basically by having a smartphone they have a business. And some of them earn as much as $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month, when they get onto it, and it's pretty good income, in India. The other set of entrepreneurs are women who are building, capital-intensive businesses. And what we've done now is created partnerships with a lot of partners. Google is a partner, Microsoft is a partner, UK India Gov is a partner, Yes Bank is a partner, Unilever is a partner. And what we really do is we run various cohorts of accelerators depending on the market, on the segment. So it could be rural women entrepreneurs, it could be women entrepreneurs building businesses that, let's say, SaaS businesses or consumer businesses. So depending on the partner, so in some ways we become the middle layer connecting capital, mentorship, and market access two different cohorts of women entrepreneurs. And the third is a lot of entrepreneurs who are building their own micro businesses. These are businesses that perhaps are still small for an Amazon, or they're still small to sort of be set up on their own. But what we end up doing is, one, we open out access to capital for them, which is micro loans, again, via NBFC partners and banking partners. And second is opening, again, market access via Sheroes. There, build your own presence on Sheroes, build your own URL on Sheroes, start selling for the first time. If you build a product, you make art, you make pickles, you are a yoga teacher, you're somebody who sells clothes or jewelry or whatever that product might be. So a lot of peer-to-peer marketplaces. I think China has some amazing models that have scaled up, because these are peer-to-peer marketplaces, these are peer-to-peer conversational commerce plays, and yeah, so that's exactly what we end up doing with entrepreneurs. And of course, then there's a whole ecosystem of men that are producing high quality content, that are offering high quality advice within the Sheroes app, within the Sheroes web, within the ecosystem. So it's not just a place to transact, but it's also a place to, when I come here, I get an idea, I grow every day. So it's a very nice loop that gets created. Woman entrepreneur comes in, slowly learns on the network, slowly starts selling, now has a brand that she wants to distribute further. So she ends up giving it to other women on the network who are micro entrepreneurs to distribute in their potential networks. So both are parallelly happening.
So Sairi, one of the things that was fascinating for me, and I learned a lot engaging with you when I first started learning about Sheroes, was this idea of social commerce. And I know you started talking about it, but I think there might be many people on the stream who, like me, it was quite new to really try to understand what this really was and what's the impact and how big it is in India and in other places.
Absolutely. So I think social media has come around, right? Social media has been around. And so as a country, we know that anybody who's on a mobile now, and COVID kind of double back that has relation to many on the internet. And for women, it's double in aspiration, because they don't need to step outside of their homes. They don't need to take family permission. So internet plus entrepreneurial opportunities is like a big win. And how does this work? So historically, there have been some models which you can call offline social commerce, like Tupperware was one such model, Mary Kay was another, but these were MLM models. So they were a little spammy in their flavor. Here, what's happening is, I'm on Sheroes. This is my community. I have 250 friends. I have 2,000 followers, and these people listen to me because they trust me. They trust my judgment. They like what I do. They like that I'm a great contributor to the community. And when I come out and say, "Hey guys, I started making art. I start selling potted plants, and I post a video every day of my potted plants. I become an influencer around potted plants, and it becomes very referenceable content. And when I add a buy button to that content, it's social commerce. I'm producing content that can be consumed, but I'm also adding a transaction layer to it based on trust. I think the difference between traditional commerce and in social commerce is that all buying decisions are backed by trust, very pull-based as opposed to push-based. And I think in India, it's very it's very genetically embedded in our social DNA. Women do a lot of this in a traditional setup in the offline world. The whole microfinance setup was this: women in groups kind of trusting each other with money and other social decisions. Now that whole layer has come online, there's content, there's video, there's live streaming, there are products. So it's basically conversational commerce. I'm going to buy from people I trust, and I'm going to build on social capital. So it matters to me that my social behavior is excellent. It matters to me that I have great ratings. It matters to me that I show up for the community every day. I think there are two companies that that are sort of similar, maybe different markets. One is Poshmark in China that just went IPO, huge IPO. Manish Chandra has built a fantastic business there. And second is a company called Red in China. It was called the Little Red Book. Now they just called Red. 85 million monthly active users, huge GMV, all peer-to-peer commerce. So the platform does no selling directly. Everything goes through somebody who's creating content and is being part of the community, as in and is investing in creating trust.
Fantastic. So I've got some good questions from our audience. Eddie Avila, my friend from Global Voices, has a question on what do you consider to be the biggest challenge in engaging and digitally including minority language communities? I guess all of you are working on this somewhat. Does anyone want to take a crack at that?
I'll share a little bit, and I'm sure Supriya and Vijay have a lot to share there, and Samira as well. I think the thing about minority language is that I think one, it does change how you build your company, because there's no one person who's an authority, who's an editorial authority anymore, because you know, what sounds right in one language doesn't sound right in another. So that itself is quite a bit of a challenge. But I think at the same time, the aspirational to not get thrown off the English web is still there. I think everybody wants to make sure that their access points are always open, and the aspiration to get on to mainstream web is still there. And we see that on Sheroes, that a lot of women come onto Sheroes as their first app, and as part of their growth journeys, they do want to sample what's going on Twitter or Instagram, which have no sort of regional content per se. But yeah, I think it's a little more complex building for multiple languages. Like we built a stack to make 17 languages live. We have only been able to make like 5 or 6 live because it's just a lot of logistics to get that going. I'm sure Supriya will agree to that. Sorry, go ahead.
So sorry, Sameer, you can go ahead.
No, I was going to say similar sort of experience in that I think the first thing that needs to happen is that tools should be available. So for example, like I said, you know, even basic creativity on platforms does not take into account what are India's specific needs. So, you know, you don't need an email to sign on to something like a Medium, for example. So I think we are seeing, so I think we are seeing a faster uptake on the languages. We have 20 languages already on ScrollStack. And I think the way this will scale will be much faster for the next generation of platforms like ours and everybody on this panel. Because in a way, the internet was highly, you know, skewed towards English, but the social media was not. I don't mean social media as Twitter and Twitter per se, but Facebook, for example, people write posts in their own languages. WhatsApp is almost entirely in people's own languages. So I think there is a third phase of the internet, which may be around social commerce. It really is going to, you know, make use of the fact that there are a billion people the next billion who actually have been expressing themselves in their own languages on the social platforms. The internet had not been designed for them. And I think now you will see people like us who are going to make use of those two, right? So on ScrollStack, for example, our experience is people are writing Hindi is the fastest growing language, right? Because I think people will want to be on the open web in their own languages in a thing that looks like any global website, right? And the other thing I would say that a hard to solve problem that we'll have to solve is that in theory, you could write in any Indian language on many of the global platforms. The problem is you'll never be found, right? So how do you solve discovery and distribution in languages is the next big challenge.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, one of the, you know, like Sairi was saying, so we are in 10 local languages right now. And one of the biggest challenges that we faced in, you know, keeping up with the quality consistently across all languages, simply because, you know, hiring and building a team in local languages is super difficult. At least we face this problem right now. And the second thing is that how do you monetize this entire piece? Like, you know, we would love to launch Assamese, right? Because it represents a large part of the country. But then again, when we are thinking of running a sustainable business, we don't have advertisers who are willing to advertise on an Assamese channel. So then it becomes more and more difficult to utilize resources and actually launch a language. Because in India, each language is like an independent country. The nuances that are involved with the aspirations of people who speak in Marathi as opposed to someone who's speaking in Bengali are totally different. So even in terms of content strategy, how we execute, how do we distribute, everything differs from each language. So yeah, it's almost like starting a new business line every time you start a new language.
One of the things that we at Rambani have been doing is leveraging the power of voice, which actually is a format which in many ways allows people even from the most marginalized communities to be able to engage, to listen easily without the barriers of literacy or access to technology. Now that's something that we have been doing, and in fact, the very objective of Rambani is to create a platform where service providers, or which largely in the considering information as a service, is able to reach the most marginalized, right, or the most underserved communities, because conventional media platforms would not be able to provide that reach, and voice would be the easiest medium, right, because people in the marginalized communities are able to listen in their own vernacular language, right, or even in the minority languages, and be able to engage with the platform. What we have been trying to do is that's where trigger this whole power of the community volunteers, the community taking ownership of creating content, right? And when these volunteers who create hyperlocal news and content from the ground, right, create content that's relevant to the community, and that's what creates that traction and the stickiness and the engagement. But again, a very important point highlighted by Supriya is that how do we monetize it, right? So, we create communities, we create very strong communities even amongst these minority groups or marginalized groups. But are there players who are willing to run campaigns or reach out to these small groups, right? So that is where the challenge always lies, the sustainability of these small platforms. But in terms of the technology tools, like for example, we have the IVR, which targets the feature phone users. We have a Mobile Vani Smart app, which targets the youth, which again, provides information in audio formats. We've created a voice bot, which again eases the whole process of engaging and making conversational messaging much easier. We've created a voice-based Quora where discovery of content is much easier. We are creating these tools, but again, one is creating the communities, one part, which of course we have been doing to a good extent because we are engaging with the communities. But the second part is the sustainability part, which again, as Supriya rightly said, is going to be difficult because although we might have NGOs or donors or governments who might want to run some campaigns and they might want to pay, but will commercial players be willing to put their money here? That is definitely going to be a challenge in the long run.
Well, I guess there's a follow-on question from Pooja in the channel, which I guess picks up on this idea of marginalized communities and people we'd reach out to, where he asks, what according to each of you is the most underserved group in India, and any community that's still missing education services and access. Maybe Vijay, do you want to take a swing at that?
This is the deprived segment. Now, if we are talking about the 60% aspirational segment, right? So the people who are now, becoming aspirational, start having access to phones and, smartphones and getting access to information and are more demanding of services or access to services, there is the whole deprived segment. Now, I don't know if there is one community, but I think there are many, because every community or every village or every, for example, geography has these communities which are outside the peripheries, right? So who are deprived, who are marginalized, both on the cases of both social and economic factors, right? So, and they are deprived of access to many of these services, including access to even your simple feature phones, right? So there are still many people like that. So it is not just about one community, but I think it's more about every geography or every state or every district pretty much has these communities, and unfortunately so. And I think that is where we really are trying to see and work towards to ensure that there is no media dark geography in the country, right? So that's how we will be able to really serve and provide information to the last man standing.
So if I add that, one way, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so I think this is a very interesting reference. Who is marginalized in India or who is a minority? I think the way to look at that is actually the top 1% is the minority. But because we see so much of it on international media. Venture obviously takes disproportionate amount of attention, venture-backed companies. I think the thing is that if you look at rural, if you look at middle India, if you look at the lowest of the per capita, and if you look at women, I think these are large communities that are actually not minorities. They are marginalized, but they are not minorities. The top 1% disproportionate attention and access. It's the digital divide and the income divide in India has only been growing in the last 2 decades. I think, and a lot of us are working on these segments because I think that's where a large amount of market sits. I think the 1% has been saturated, and I think the first internet revolution, the first .com buzz boom, the second, and I think the first decade and a half were invested in building for the 1%. It's only in last 4 or 5 years after data and payments went more and more to every part of the country is that we are able to think about this in a little more distributed way. So going back to I think large chunks of people are marginalized. If you look at women, if you look at middle class, if you look at youth, averagely 100+ million kind of cohorts, 200 million in certain cases. Women are 500 million women. So I think pretty stark numbers there.
I mean, just in case of, just a point to highlight, just in terms of the opportunity, if I may say so, or rather, people who are still, at that, exactly as Terry said, in terms of a large parts of people who are deprived. 34% of women in rural India and about 55% of men in rural India have access to internet, right? So have at least one. So which we're talking about very, very large numbers who still haven't even seen the face of internet, who don't have access to these services or to the information that can really change their lives. Right. So I think both in terms of disappointment that they've not really had access, which could really have changed, and two, in terms of the opportunity that we are still working towards, I think these are very, very large numbers. As rightly said, I think this is not a minority. This is a majority.
That's a fascinating insight. Samir, I saw you go off mic. Did you want to respond?
No, I was going to say that it is that there is a very large number, even by just the number of people who are below the poverty line. Just official poverty line is a few hundred million, and that the number of people who have access even after this data revolution, like at least half the population is still outside of that, right? So if you assume there are 500 million connected smartphones, but I think for the first time, like Sairi says, we have a glimmer of hope that you have a technology that is as widely distributed as almost anything else in India, right? Someone jokingly said, I don't think the stat is true, but it is worth sort of, people say there are more toilets, more people with access to phones than toilets at, personal private toilets. So for the first time, you have a technology which cost is low enough that almost everybody can access it.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to chime in there. We just drove down 3,000 kilometers from Delhi to southern part of the country. And, we didn't have to pay cash once on any of the toll booths. It was automated, digital payments, fantastic mobile access, but no toilets, no public washrooms, around the highway. So I think, yes, it is as dichotomous as it sounds.
Yeah, and sorry again to build on what she said. Payments is one fascinating thing where having going back and forth between India and the US, I'm so surprised that how fast and how quickly the Indian infrastructure for payment has moved and how sophisticated it is relative to the West. Right? You can anybody can accept digital payments in India. It takes 5 minutes, and it's a typically improvised Indian setup where you print out your code, and people can scan it and you get the money, right? So I think there are some things that are moving very, very rapidly, and a lot of it is digital tech.
Well, just pulling on that thread a bit and taking it in quite a radically different direction from what we've just discussed about India each language group being an entire market, about, the number of people and so on that you're serving. I guess the one thing before we run out of time that I wanted to pull on, and Supriya, perhaps you can open this discussion, is, we talk about India, it's this massive market, there are many markets inside, but even with all of that, I see you expanding and going beyond the borders in India. So what have we learned in India that we can take to other parts of the world? And what are you doing with that?
Sure. So I think how we sort of, are looking at this is, so I think, like I said earlier, with us, one of the problems that was there was monetization when we went to regional languages, because English is a language that everybody is willing to advertise on and pay for, because they believe that a person who is consuming content in English has purchasing power. But we didn't see that kind of traction in the multiple other regional languages that we went into. But what we've, actually seen as trends is that there are a lot of demographies that are similar to India, similar in terms of aspirations, in terms of content consumption, in terms of, career, etc. So, for example, Indonesia is a market that we have tried to explore, and we do have a channel that's actually live there. And we've seen that the aspirations of the youth, what they think of the government there, how they sort of, go about school, college, etc., and what they want to be is 90%, coinciding with what we're already doing over here. Another thing is that in these countries as well, there are multiple dialects. So while there is one, sort of national language, there are other multiple dialects that have millions of people who are consuming content there. So the pattern is very similar, and that's, I think, what excites us as an organization to try and, move to other similar demographies.
That's great. So just before we've got 4 minutes left. I've got 20 questions I could still ask each of you. But we'll have to start wrapping up, unfortunately, because we have a hard stop on the stream. But the one thing, just before I let you each get into some closing remarks, is Chris is asking if you could each share links to your projects in the chat. So maybe if you could just pop in your websites so participants can have a look as well. So perhaps a minute each. I'll start with you, Vijay, and we can, any final comments for people just thinking about the challenges in India, any advice you'd give to people embarking on projects in the country, any big problems to solve?
No, thanks so much. I mean, in terms of, I think we're clear in terms of where we are going, in terms of creating the technology tools, the appropriate technology tools, riding on our voice-based, format, right? Reaching out to the last mile, reaching out to the communities, helping organizations engage with these communities, creating platforms that can help them, not just provide information, but also find out pathways and create standard operating procedures for grievance redressal. This was quite evident in the way we were able to handle our, how we were able to repurpose our platform during the COVID times. We had close to almost like a 2.5 million calls, so close to 1 million plus users used our platform, 25,000 plus grievances that were recorded on the platform. So our objective is to, again, as I said, reverse the flow of information, create more a federated network of community media platforms, and leverage the insights and learnings that we get from these platforms, to not just help organizations, to help businesses, but also more importantly from the government or other stakeholders who are working to improve the lives of these people, right? So if information is indeed power, then I think we really have to reverse the flow of it, and that's where we believe long-term sustainable change can happen. And I think Ramani's goal and the road and pathway ahead is quite clear on that front, and we are working towards building more and more innovations in that direction.
Thanks, Vijay. Sari?
Well, I think one interesting sort of personal learning along the way is that you've got to sort of poke the business models a lot more. I think about 10 years ago, if you were a founder, everybody said, does something like this exist in the US? Can you copy, paste a model from the West and bring here? And I think for the longest time, this was a big battle. It was an internal battle, and it was also a way to say, how do we retrofit models that don't belong here? And I think truly, if you're going to build a business for the next billion, then you've got to build a model that's very, very from the context, because the market doesn't have the same depth. the macros don't match. So I think that's one big takeaway as a founder. And second is, I think, investing in communities. I think historically this has really worked well in the offline world, and I think there's still a lot of opportunity to build communities online. That space is just about getting like super early. All of us are super early in our journeys in terms of where this can sort of land up. If you fast forward this, let's say 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, each of these platforms can be a few hundred million users, and also I think create massive impact, identity impact, income impact, and of course I think the quality of discourse on the internet, I think, which I think Internet 1.0 didn't do enough of, or maybe Internet 2.0 or whatever we call it. But I think the quality of Internet matters, and I think a lot of what we do kind of changes that narrative.
Thank you, Samir.
Yeah, I think one lesson probably, and this applies more to maybe tech and platforms, is that I think the time has also come that we can build in India for the rest of the world. We have enough local user base that innovations that are valuable in India would be valuable around the world, right? And payments is going to be one of the big things. Mobile first internet is another. So I don't think we have had too many consumer companies yet that have come out of India. If you see the Indian unicorns or whatever you want to call them, there has been a wave of services based. There has been a wave of SaaS marketplaces. But I think you will see, hopefully, some of those on this panel. You will see more innovation coming out of India. Because India now is enough of a petri dish as well as a scaled market for something, that you will see, platforms emerging out of India that are useful around the world, and that's an opportunity.
Thank you, Samir. Supriya, we'll give you the last word.
Sure. So I think what I've sort of learned along the way is that when you're working for this audience, it's a game of patience and persistence. So we've been building content for 6 years. And I think what has happened as a result of that is that there is this immense amount of trust and loyalty that we've built amongst our audience. And the second thing that I've seen is that the power of referral in this community is super high. And I don't see that with, other communities as well. So when you are looking at building a product for the next billion users, it takes time to get to monetization. But, we are at the stage where we've realized that we've built this huge, top of the funnel. We have people watching our content and they trust us. And now is the time that we are moving to our, B2C monetization of what is it that we can actually provide of value for which they're willing to pay us.
Thank you so much. And thank you to this entire panel. It's been such a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. And I'm sure our audiences as well. I'd also like to thank Sarah and Andy from Mozilla for hosting our room and pulling us all together. And of course, finally to our audience. You guys have asked such great questions in the room. So thank you so much for joining us and engaging with us. Keep well, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. And